Hello and welcome to another episode of the Investing RN podcast. Today we are talking with Stacy Stegenga.
She is coming from Colorado most recently, but she worked all over the country and she's traveled all over the world. She was in the Air Force. She's passionate about traveling. She's passionate about improving the world of healthcare for nurses specifically. And then she talked about, what was it, her transition from California to Colorado. And what was she saying about that?
You're going to have to listen and find out.
That's it.
But she talks about buying property in Florida and a few other areas and how she did it. And now she's, as Colin said earlier, she's using her platform. I think her handle is investingforfreedom_RN. And she uses that to educate nurses and healthcare on how to become financially free.
All right. Well, welcome to the Investing RN podcast. Today we are with Stacy Stegenga. I'm probably butchering that, even though we just practiced.
No, it's okay.
But first off, it's a couple days after Veterans Day weekend, so I just wanted to thank you for your service. You were a service member for about 18 years. Did some nursing and travel nursing. Now you're a real estate investor. Sounds like you're on your way to financial freedom. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get to where you are now? What was your background into nursing and all that?
Yeah. So the biggest part, I am still actually serving. I'm almost to retirement. So I'll retire in 25. So just 2 more years. But I was active duty straight out of high school and I was overseas. I made rank super fast in the military and I was just feeling unfulfilled. I was super attracted to medicine, but I didn't know what component of medicine I wanted to go into. So I actually got out of active duty from Korea and went to Florida and started shadowing medical professionals and ultimately decided to go with nursing. I got out of the military completely, but then it's actually super cool. My nursing school program director was a Vietnam nurse. So she was a flight nurse in Vietnam. She just talked to me a lot about her experience doing that. And I was like, man, that sounds so cool. So I was gunning for critical care right out of the gate because I wanted to do flight nursing. Well, I had to sell my soul basically and move to a city far away, sign a contract like many of us do to get into that nurse residency so I could go straight into critical care. It was great, but working in Florida burned me out. I hit what I considered the first bottom within 2 years of nursing. So that's when I took up travel nursing. I was lucky enough to find pediatrics. Pediatrics trauma has been my most favorite specialty I've worked in. But once I got the golden handcuffs of California, it was so hard to leave. But after 4 years of flight nursing, I just really wanted to be closer to family and settle down. So that's what brought me to Colorado. Colorado is super unique, I guess is the way to say it, because we are some of the most underpaid healthcare professionals in the nation, especially for the cost of living. One way I like to say this is that leaving California, my income cut in half. Another way to say it is that I was a critical care nurse for 8 years when I moved here. And at 8 years of critical care experience, my pay was the same as when I left Florida after 2 years. And Florida has a far lower cost of living. So that is how horrible we are paid here. I immediately felt the pain of it. I could barely afford to even live on my own as a 33-year-old adult with a bachelor's degree. So I just immediately started educating myself and was lucky enough to find the book Set for Life by Scott Trench. I became obsessed with real estate investing, and then the rest is kind of history.
Nice. So you started off ER, you said, in Tampa. And I think it's interesting because I had heard you on a different podcast and you mentioned your pay being cut in half going to Colorado. And I think I didn't get the part where you'd come to California as a travel nurse first. Mm-hmm. So that makes a lot more sense now. Because, yeah, I think for a long time, and I think probably even still, California was paying the highest for travel nurses. But I was kind of surprised actually to hear that Colorado had such I guess, poor working conditions for nurses, because to me, Colorado seems like maybe it's more on the same line as California politically and in a lot of ways like progressively. So when I was hearing that, I was actually really surprised to hear that Colorado would be not a great place to work as a nurse, I guess.
So it is still that drastic, though, because I was staff when I left California. I traveled for 1 year and a half, just over a year, and became staff at a children's hospital that I fell in love with in California. So even staff to staff nursing here, it was still a 50% income cut. I would say the biggest variance there was that I gave up flight nursing. So I was flight nursing, obviously getting paid a little bit better for my experience there. But it was just still extremely shocking to me, A, how much my critical care experience did not matter for my hiring pay in Colorado. But then also, to your point, my cost of living expenses in San Diego is the exact same as Denver. Like literally my rent, everything is the same. So it is truly how grossly underpaid they are in Colorado. And a lot of that is when we'd legalized, the cost of living skyrocketed. The hospitals give raises based off of each other. So they consider themselves the market here. So if everybody gives you a quarter raise, then they say that they're being competitive for the market. So they're controlling and minimizing the pay, which is the issue.
So when you went from California, you said your salary cut in half. Are you comfortable telling us what that looked like in forms of numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. So gross, I was at just over six figures. I think it was like 110 something. And then when I moved to Colorado, it was gross 50. So really, when you're looking at that, my take home was high 30s, maybe 40s.
Yeah.
After taxes. So
wow.
A disgusting salary to try to live on in your established adult life.
Yeah, that seems so low. I know my first nursing job out of school, I was getting like $18 an hour or something like that. And
exactly.
I mean, I've seen the trajectory go up a little bit, but I didn't realize there are some states that are kind of still stuck on that in that area.
And I feel like a big part of it is because Colorado is not unionized. And so with the cost of living, until we unionize, there's just not going to be enough advocating to get us to what we need.
What year was that you'd moved from California to Colorado?
2018.
Okay. So yeah, Denver was like well on its way by that point. Because I mean, I know we were there. I think I was there in 2018 or 19 just visiting, and I was looking at, housing and that kind of stuff, just kind of curious. And yeah, it was pretty close to what we were paying. I'm in Los Angeles, and it was not too far off at that time. So that's wild.
So going back to while you're working as a nurse, you were in what specialty areas were you in again?
So I've worked almost all of them now. I went from ER to pediatric trauma to cardiac ICU, surgical ICU. That didn't last very long, only 8 months there. Did flight nursing simultaneous to medical ICU. I did critical care float pool, then got super burnt out, went to the cath lab, and then back to pediatrics, and then into research.
Okay. And what do you think contributed most to that burnout? Did you feel forced to pick up so many extra shifts because of the wages being so low, or?
100%. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, it's just even the sentiment, even like going in every single day. The hospital that hired me was A, trying to increase their trauma designation, but B, it was in a lower economic, lower income area. And so your patients are just way sicker, and you're just breaking your back, taking care of these like super sick patients. And just to where the entrenchment, whatever the word is, all the states up north bring their patients to this hospital. And so there's a lot of desolate like farm areas and all this stuff up in like Wyoming and all these other areas, and they'd bring their patients down. And so we just had the sickest of the sick. We had no resources, and you're just taking care of these very challenging patients for pennies. And so that is truly what was doing me in. It was just how hard we were working to save people's lives with what felt like our hands tied behind our backs, because we didn't have the resources to help these people the way they needed.
Yeah, I think that's something that's very common in nursing. And I know that's a trap that I fell into myself, like, because you see these extra shifts, you're picking them up, and it's some extra money, but as soon as you stop doing that, you stop making the extra money. And I know we'll talk about real estate here in a little bit, but that's one avenue where we all found a little bit more freedom in our own time. And it helps eliminate the burnout rate. So you're not in the hospital 60, 70 hour weeks.
Exactly.
So what was your introduction into investing and into earning income outside of the hospital?
Yeah. So after I read that book, I started going down the Bigger Pockets rabbit hole, just listening to all of their podcasts and learning. I quickly realized that nobody around me was interested in investing. So I felt like I was like binging information on my days off, but then not having anybody to talk to, or I would be like on call for the hospital or working like 20-hour shifts or just insane things, and then losing my momentum. And so I joined a group that's for veterans specifically that are investors. And through that, I was able to like stay in the conversation and start talking to people and develop friendships and relationships. And that gave me the courage to start going to meetups in person in Denver.
Yeah, and then you said you read the book by Scott Trench, and you I remember or heard you saying on that Real Estate Rookie podcast that $1 saved is better than $1 earned.
Yes.
And I guess that kind of goes back to what you're saying about the nurse burnout.
Yep.
So with that mindset and these like real estate meetups and everything, how did you kind of decide what avenue you were going to take? I think you mentioned house hacking. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. And so just to touch on the $1 saved versus $1 earned, I feel like it's like a catchy little saying that when people, it just like flies over your head. But like truly, this is the importance of why we shouldn't pick up overtime and sell our soul to those extra shifts that just burn us out more. And what's far more effective is cutting your expenses and living in frugality. And that money saved goes much farther than working harder for a highly taxed income. And so it was through that mindset shift that I decided to move into a house hack, because that was my biggest expense here, was living. And so without forgoing my Starbucks and, the other things that I enjoy, going out and being social, I cut back on my living expenses and I moved into a house hack, which is super common in Denver. It should be pretty common in most places now, but it was also a good way for me to trial if I wanted to buy a house hack without committing to buying the house. So I moved in, I had 4 roommates and I was the 5th with a pager while I was on call, and they still loved me. So I like to tell people to be open-minded, because it truly set me up for success and is what allowed me to save all that money for my first down payment.
So once you bought this house, you bought it with a thought that you were going to house hack it, right? So what?
No, so I moved into it as a renter, saved. And that's when I realized that I wanted to invest out of state because my income would go so much farther. So one house in Denver at the time was $450,000 to $500,000. And I was able to buy 4 duplexes out of state for almost that same exact cost. Almost.
I was going to say, that sounds kind of familiar, because we invest in Wisconsin, and living in Los Angeles, we're like on the west side, kind of close to the beach. And I think it was like, we got up to like 15 to 20 units before the total value of what we had was worth like a 1-bedroom condo here.
Exactly.
Like, this is crazy.
Literally, it goes so much farther.
So building or buying these properties out of state while you're working still for full-time as a nurse, that sounds, to most people, that's going to sound extremely overwhelming. So how did you go about that, and what did your days look like while you were doing that and still building?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is that initially, while I was doing this, I had a property manager. So aside from your initial like analysis of the property and then finding these vendors that you need to have, like a good investor-friendly agent, a good lender that's going to take care of you, and a good property manager that's going to take care of your property. Once you've established your team, then truly it's like smooth sailing. So day to day, I really had no requirements initially. I just set it and forget it kind of thing. And it was glorious starting to see that income flow in from my properties. I have since fired my property managers and I now self-manage, which is twofold reasons. A, I needed to find a new property manager anyways, but then B, I'm going for real estate professional designation this year, which is a super important thing to focus on for healthcare professionals. It is the best tax benefit, I can say without a doubt, for any high net worth earner. So like physicians, PAs, basically anybody but nurses. Kind of a joke, but they should really find out and educate yourself about that tax benefit, because it's truly priceless and one of the biggest reasons I love real estate.
So how does that, as a nurse, how does that specifically benefit you? in this situation? Because that's actually something that my wife and I, which my wife is Josh's sister, but we manage the portfolio that we have. And since we left nursing, like I would not call us high net worth earners at this point, but that's something that we'd like to take advantage of as well. So maybe you can just kind of explain how that works a little more.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is, first of all, this is a very highly litigated tax benefit because it is such a massive benefit that you have to be extremely cautious to make sure you follow the rules. So verify everything that I'm saying. We're too good and too pretty to go to jail is what I like to tell people. So, but basically my understanding of it is I don't know how beneficial it would be if you don't have a W-2 income. But if you do have a high W-2 income, it allows you to capture all of your depreciation through a cost seg. And then when you have that designation as a real estate professional, it allows you to subtract that full amount. So we're talking about like 5 figures tax saving from that depreciation with the designation of real estate professional. Now that status is earned by doing what's called material participation, which is basically what you and your wife are doing. It's like active management of your property. There's a different designation that's called the short-term rental loophole. That has different rules. So look into that. If you do have short-term rentals, it's far more easy to get the designation. But the long story short is that it allows you to carry forward those passive losses, I think is the correct terminology. So it just decreases your taxable income significantly year after year until you've exhausted the full benefit.
So once at what point did you decide to go ahead and take over property management? Was it you saw your taxes and you're like, oh, I can save this much taxes if I do this? Or was it like, I need to save a little bit more money to work towards the financial independence? What was kind of going on in your head when you decided to go ahead and take it back over?
Yep. So it was kind of both of those. And then I had a 6-figure loss last year with real estate. And I was shocked, I think, at how much, because it was a real loss, not a paper loss. So I think I was just shocked at how little that helped me. And so I started looking into how real estate was actually supposed to help me, because I was like, I thought this is why everybody buys real estate. And here I lost 6 figures in real estate and it did nothing. And so long story short, I just started researching it. And then because I was decreasing my working hours this year, but still earn more working in research, it was still going to offset my income enough that it would be beneficial and help me recapture some of that loss with that 5-figure potential decrease in my income. So basically at the end of this year, it will look like I earned $0 active. And then when everything else is passive, it's a totally different tax bracket and things of that nature. And I'm hoping I'm saying this all correctly. There's a tax expert in the audience. Forgive me if I'm butchering this.
Yeah.
I swear I looked up all the rules and I'm following them.
A good time to say this is not legal advice. Go figure it out for yourself.
Exactly. Yes. Please see your CPA for further advice.
Yeah.
Because I am not it.
Well, as part of your team, because I know you mentioned wanting to diversify your income, and with you doing this out of state, obviously you're building a team there with contractors and people in site. Mm-hmm. But on the financial side, what does that look like? Have you built a real estate specific CPA or a real estate lawyer?
Yeah. So my CPA is Brandon Cox, who is the previous CPA of Brandon Turner. So he's like one of the, I hope he doesn't mind me calling him this, but the like OG tax expert in the Bigger Pockets community. So he's brilliant and a wizard at these things. And then a lawyer, yes, I do have a legal team, but they are state specific. I'm not at a point where I need a real estate team that's like nationally certified yet. So they're just beneficial for advising you on certain legal entities that protect you, asset protection, things of that nature. So definitely people that are worth having. I think the blessing and the curse of the internet is that a lot of people can find information, but in my experience, it is truly the best to consult these experts because they know what's best for your situation.
That's something we've been really struggling with the last couple of years, is finding a CPA or a tax expert that's really good at real estate specifically. Mm-hmm. And once we realized how expensive that was going to be, there's a little bit of a sticker shock. So I'm sure you realize that as well.
Yes. Yeah. And there are thresholds. I don't know how much you want me to go into this, but there are like different levels of the like tax planning, tax preservation, tax, your like wealth. I forget what their words are, but there's people that do really big plans and have to meet with you multiple times a year. They are extremely expensive. There's some middle of the ground ones, which is like Brandon Cox. And then there are just some beginning ones. And I just like really advise people to look into it because I had to amend my tax returns because they were filed incorrectly in the beginning. So definitely find the right level for you and just know that it's worth it because it will save you in the benefits for sure.
So going back to the four duplexes or 4 properties that you bought?
Four duplexes.
4 different duplexes that you bought in Florida.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So back, let's say 5 years ago, before we started buying our own real estate, if you told me that you own 4 duplexes, I would think to myself, oh my goodness, like that she's extremely wealthy. But then now that we started buying stuff ourselves, we realized that the cash flow is not always as much as you would expect. So what does that look like for you? Has that given you the financial independence to do whatever you want, or what does that look like?
Yeah. So this has been a really good learning lesson for me recently. So yes, it does, because I am super lucky. And this is why I encourage everybody to consider long-term rentals. So when I bought my first duplex in Tampa, the market rent was $950. It is now $1,450. And so when I have a 30-year mortgage locked in, all of that, as long as I bought the property and it was cash flowing at $950, all of that gain is an additional cash flow that will be locked in forever. So this is the benefit of long-term rental. And that those are real numbers. So that is, I forget how much it cash flowed, 150 to almost 200. So now all of my properties are cash flowing somewhere between $5 to $7, almost $800, which is unheard of in real estate. And I am extremely lucky to have been so conservative in my numbers and then moved into Tampa as an investor at the right time, because much of that is the appreciation in rent from the demand of all the people moving there. So that is the benefit of doing a lot of market research and buying right and holding, because that is possible for anybody. And then, yes, I agree that it does seem like a lot. And I also want people to understand that I had to put 25% down on all of those properties. So it is possible to buy real estate without any of your own money in the deal. However, I, again, being risk adverse, didn't want to be that over leveraged. So I have 25% down. So it is like $200,000 sitting in all of those. And then, of course, the appreciation, which is not realized. So I don't personally count that. But just like touching on the pros and the cons of putting that 25% down, understanding your leverage and the risk that's associated with that. Because that's essentially kind of what happened with 2008.
Yeah. So have you, at this point, have you fully replaced your income as an RN, or you getting close, or what does that look like?
Oh, yeah. That was the second. Yes. Thank you. So the thing about financial independence and financial freedom that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about, and the hard lesson I had to learn, is that it's a moving target. So yes, I have that cash flow, but my expenses on your property can change at any single time. So when your market appreciates, so do your property taxes. So both my property taxes, and then because a totally separate issue, Florida has an insurance crisis going on right now. It's so bad, like way worse than the rest of the nation. One of my policies 8x'd, and I'm not kidding. Like it literally went from 1,000 something to 8,000 something because of this insurance crisis. And so I cried, to be completely honest, because as good as my cash flow it is not that good. So I had this like whole, okay, cry, now let's figure it out moment. And I did, but my policies are still 3 times what I used to pay. And all of that cuts into my cash flow. So to answer your question, I was very close, a couple $100 away from fully replacing my income. And now I'm further away, but it's still around $1,000 that I have left to replace. So
why do you
getting closer?
Why do you think that is? Like, are they like underwriting for more expenses because of hurricanes coming through? Because this is Florida specific, right? Like, or is it just because they can? They're like, oh, let's just make more money.
So what happened is, and this is a good thing for other people to know, there used to be a law in Florida where contractors had some sort of right to notify you of damage, and then they could pull a insurance claim on your policy on your behalf. And so what happened is there were people that were intentionally committing fraud and convincing people that they needed to have their roofs replaced when it wasn't necessarily true, pulling the claim on their behalf and then maybe fixing it or not fixing it. That's situation by situation. But the long story short of it is, I forget the number right now, but there was bankrupt over 5 insurance companies in 2021 alone. I forget what the number was on 22 because they can't afford to pay out this many claims. And it was statewide that this occurred. But there was like over 100,000, I think, unresolved litigation cases when DeSantis changed the law at the end of 22 or beginning of 23. So it was because of that all this insurance fraud happened. And then all these companies are over leveraged and decreasing their risk by 8xing the policies. So it's a whole thing. The government is going to have to intervene, but it's really disheartening because people will lose their home because they're not going to be able to afford the insurance policies. Like, that's how bad it is.
So I've heard of all this insurance stuff going on down in Florida and Texas even, and I assumed it was because of increased hurricane damage or other things. I didn't realize that there was government issues and laws that have been placed.
Yeah. And of course, that's compounding it. But yeah, unfortunately, a lot of insurance companies tried pulling out of the state, which also increased the policies. And so that's where DeSantis, I believe, or a state program came in and they started allotting so many policies to each company so that none of them were specifically over leveraged. But they were trying to refuse to even underwrite policies, which is just insane for people that live and own properties there. But yeah, it'll be super interesting to see. But that was one of the biggest reasons I ended up having to pivot out of that market.
So that's something that if you're deciding to invest in a certain area, make sure you know what the laws are in the area, whether it's a tenant-friendly state, landlord-friendly state. Just there's a lot of things you need to do in addition to underwriting the property.
And so with your current portfolio, is it all long-term, or are you doing some other styles of rentals or investing?
They are all long-term. One of them was meant to be a midterm. I'm very familiar with this strategy because of my travel nurse experience. I started actually speaking on it, but I did not end up implementing it because the neighborhood just still had enough noise and riffraff and things that I was concerned that people wouldn't feel safe enough. And I would never want to put a travel nurse in that position. So I ultimately ended up deciding to leave it as a long-term.
And then it sounds like you got a little multifamily thing in the works now. Is that where you're shifting to now? Like larger multifamily?
Yep. I'm going commercial in every sense of the strategy. I would love to buy a laundromat someday. Car washes are super exciting and interesting to me. But knowing everything that I know about the multifamily strategy, I decided to pursue that in the commercial world first so that I could understand more of how the industry works. The lending is completely different. So yes, I am under contract on my first 8-unit multifamily in the Midwest. So excited about that.
You're coming to our market, huh?
We're gonna put a border around Wisconsin. No, I'm just kidding.
Feel free.
No, you're welcome. Come on in. You're always welcome.
Thank you.
So what does your schedule look like right now? So you're still in the hospital. Go through what your day looks like right now and what you want your day to look like and what's your goal perfect day look like.
Yeah. So working in research, I actually have the pleasure of working remotely. And then I'm only working 20 hours a week. So depending on when I have meetings with people within the hospital and so on and so forth, I work blocks of time that rotate morning or afternoon every day. And then when I'm not doing that, all of my focus is on real estate. So I am self-managing through Lane, which I'm personally obsessed with. And it's just basically like an outsourced online property management service. So I do a lot of that. And then my Instagram and all the other types of work that I do. So outside of those 4 to 5 hours that I'm working at my W-2, I'm hard at work for real estate, doing due diligence, researching markets, strategies, all sorts of stuff.
I think Josh is on that same Instagram path too. He's trying to get me involved, but I'm slightly resistant to it. But so what finally pushed you over, I guess, to actually like fully invest in the Instagram space and the time and all that?
Yeah, so a lot of peer pressure. I will be honest that I was deathly afraid of starting my Instagram. It was 100% like imposter syndrome, and have always had the experience in the hospital that there are some cutthroat healthcare professionals. And so I was just so fearful that that was going to be the same experience on Instagram and that people were just going to be like savages. And I just had so many fears. And the long story short of it is that one of my friends came to me and they were like, because I struggled severely. I'm kind of skipping over a lot of the mental health issues that I had with the burnout, but I was really struggling. And they said to me, like, if you can help one person prevent having to get to that point with their mental health and feeling stuck in a toxic environment, feeling hopeless, they said to me, like, are you really telling me that you're too scared to help somebody that it could change their life? And so I was like, okay, fine. And so I started it and then started meeting so many beautiful people in healthcare. And so I'm just obsessed. And yeah, it's just a free source of education. I just share everything that I've learned. And I just hope to inspire other people to do this and be free.
I kind of had that same shift in my mindset. We were at a conference and the speaker, he said, if you were invited to speak to 1,000 people about something you're extremely passionate about, most of us would say yes. I mean, sure, you'd be nervous and maybe you turn it down because the nerves are there. Mm-hmm. But diving fully into your social media platforms, a good video will get 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, sometimes 20,000 views. So if you're invited to speak to a group of 20,000 people to something that you're very passionate about, we would all use that or we would all agree to that.
Yes.
And that was something that kind of shifted my mindset. And even though my Instagram, it's a little bit of fun, or it's a lot of fun, it's a lot of time, but at the same time, I want to help people. And that's what the main purpose of it is.
Yeah. I saw that transformation happen. I was going to tell you, you're really glowing up. Yeah, it's so funny, like how we all like learn our way through it. But yeah, Instagram is challenging, but at the end of the day, I'm like, it's just a free source of education. I just do put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it, and it's a lot of work. So I just hope to help others as much as possible.
So with your Instagram, is your big goal for that to kind of network more for real estate, or is it like more the nurse advocacy piece, like trying to help other people out that were in your position?
Yeah. So the biggest part is definitely the nurse advocacy, just really spreading the word about investing so that nobody feels trapped or hopeless, like I said. But the other big part is for sure, I personally believe from my experiences in healthcare, I really feel like we're at a critical juncture, and this is going to get ugly really fast if changes are not made on a national level. And that's for like healthcare professionals across the board, not just nurses. So my hope was to build a community and kind of rally the people so that when the time comes to take action in whatever way that looks like, whether it's being at a walk in Washington, D.C., signing a petition, I don't know what it's going to look like when it comes up, but I just wanted to be having the community ready so that we can take action in any way and I can contribute any way that I can to changing it. I just have this, I don't want to say guilt, but it's unlike me to not change things for the better. And so for me to leave healthcare, I don't want it to be out of resentment and hatred. You know, I want to change it for the better so that the new generations don't have to go through what I experienced. So whatever that looks like, I just am trying to prepare so that I'm ready to help.
I love that. Not to take it away from this, because I think that's the most important thing that we can be doing. And that's kind of the purpose of our podcast, is to advocate for nurses and just kind of expose people to different avenues of generating income so you don't feel trapped into your job as a nurse. But going back to the real estate a little bit, what are your plans for that? Is that going to be, are you all in? Are you going to be doing that the rest of your career? Do you want to step away from nursing as soon as possible? Yeah, just what are your plans for that?
Yes, I want to step away from nursing as soon as possible. I would say it's interesting. I don't know what the future holds for me in real estate. It's so similar to nursing that there are a million different ways that you can be successful in real estate. It's one of my favorite things. So you can kind of choose your own adventure. And then once you stabilize that asset, if you don't like it, do something different next time. So I'm so new into the commercial world. I'm really loving it. I love to learn. I love the challenge. I just don't know. I can't say for sure that that's going to be the only route I go. I currently believe that I don't want to syndicate. And just to explain to your audience, that's when a whole bunch of investors come together and buy a very large asset, each contributing typically an equal share. And the reason that I don't want to do that is if you're buying a 200 unit apartment and you bring on 130 investors, you are diluting the benefit of that asset times 130 shares. And so the person in charge of operating that asset, it becomes a job in management of that asset. And I don't want to do that because the entire purpose of my investing is so that I don't have to be forced to one single path or work or job, if you will. So I want that freedom. And so just below that is what's called joint venture. And it's where you pool investors on a smaller scale, and then you keep more of the equity for yourselves. So I think that's where I'm going to thrive, but TBD, we'll see. Hopefully that is my plan for this first 8-unit multifamily that I'm under contract for. So it will be the beta. And as long as I'm happy with the returns that I'm providing for people, I think that will be the route that I'll go, but we'll see.
On that joint venture topic, I guess taking a step back, what is your current portfolio looking like today? And then how did you get there? Was that with your own money, or have you used this joint venture technique before to get you here? And then maybe just kind of breaking down how that joint venture setup works.
Yeah, absolutely. So my current portfolio is 8 units, which is the 4 duplexes that are all in Tampa. It was all funded on my nursing dime. I didn't have any investors. 25% down. The caveat, or the one exception, I should say, is my 3rd duplex. I did raise private money because I bought the asset cash. So half of it was my cash, which was around 100 something, 120, I think I put in of my own. And then the other 100 was from private investors. But I pulled a HELOC and paid them back in 66 days. So the asset is currently totally mine. So that was the only unique financing situation. And then going forward in the commercial world, things are very different. Your lending is based off of the performance of the asset that you're buying. So it's less to do with my income and my net worth. Although that is looked at, it's not the sole basis of the lending. So it goes off of what's called your debt service coverage ratio, which is essentially how the property is operating. With the joint venture structure, it's different. So when you get up into the syndicating level, there's SEC involved. There's all these laws, requirements, things. It becomes much more like the stock market in the sense of a share, if you will. When you're in joint venture, it's smaller. So you're still more in that true real estate asset component. And so we'll all have equal shares and we'll all have equal roles and responsibilities within the asset, which is required for the legal designation. You can't be a passive investor in a joint venture.
I guess that's kind of been our thing too. We're I don't know how to put it, but we just want all the equity.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I feel like, and I mean this with all due respect, but some people just don't understand the concept of how important that equity is. You're not wealth building unless you're preserving that equity. And so when you're diluting the benefit of the asset and sharing all of these actual shares, the 130 people versus 5, your slice is so much bigger on a small scale. So everybody thinks bigger is better. Sometimes that's not necessarily the case. In a joint venture, your tax benefits are better, can be better, but there are a lot of benefits to staying in that smaller structure. So,
well, I think with the syndication model, obviously it's like attractive because you're getting these bigger, portfolios or properties or whatever. And then you hear all these people talking about like, oh yeah, 1,600 units like owned and operated or under whatever management. But then, whether or not like what percentage of that they actually own might be significantly less units that they like technically own compared to like if you're doing it the way you're talking about doing it. So
Yeah,
it's
I
an
own
interesting
like 0.89, aka less than one share of 242 doors. So yeah,
right.
thank goodness
Yeah.
I'm not coming on here telling you I own 250 doors because
Oh, a lot of people do that. I've
I
heard
know
that.
it's true, but
So I want to kind of pick apart that one deal where you had, it was a joint venture and then you used a HELOC to buy them back out. Can you tell us a little bit about that structure? What were the expectations going in? And then, how did you do that?
yeah, so the first thing is that the cash that I had on hand, that 6 figures, is because my first 2 duplexes appreciated so much in Tampa that I was able to do a cash out refi and pull out almost $60,000 of value in both of those. And so I did that so that I could continue buying more properties. But obviously you cannot buy a duplex with just $120,000. And one of the duplexes that was next to one that I already owned, I was like trying to become a real estate investor and thought that I had to do my first off-market deal in order for that to be true. So I was stalking the duplex. And the long story short is right when I got his information from Skip Tracing, he listed it on the MLS. I was devastated. And it was also when the values started massively increasing in Tampa. And so my first duplex next door, I bought for $165. This one, he was asking $265, I want to say. The numbers didn't work. So I don't buy properties when the numbers don't work. So what I did was offered cash so I could decrease that initial purchase price. And that's where, in order to do that, I needed a private money loan. So I went to friends that knew and trusted me. They knew about my investment experience. So they loaned it to me. The way that I structured that was they were very kind and they did not ask me for any points. So it was just a flat interest rate. So I think it was a waterfall agreement in the sense 0 to 60 days was like 8%, 60 to 90 was going to be 9%. And then each threshold of amount of time after would increase or have additional stipulations. And I had a plan for execution. The 0 to 60 days was to pull a HELOC. At 6 months, I would have refied and so on and so forth. So luckily, I was able to execute that HELOC within 66 days. And so I pulled their capital out, paid them back. And then now I own the asset outright minus the HELOC.
I know a lot of new investors are really hesitant, us included, to use other people's money, especially when we're first starting. But it sounds like you had done your research, you had a plan, you knew exactly what you're doing. And people aren't going to lend you money if they don't know that you are competent and know what you're doing. So as long as you show that confidence and give them a plan, a lot of people are okay lending some money.
Yes. And not just a plan, you need to have A, B, and C, because you always need exit strategies and backup plans, because even with me, it was when the prime of the market, the lending market shift. And I was one of the last HELOCs that got approved before they stopped lending in the beginning of 22. So definitely always have backup plans and understand the requirements before you do it. There are like seasoning periods, which is to prevent money laundering. So those things you should really look into so that you understand the rules and stipulations that you're up against before you make empty promises.
So on that topic of the multiple exit strategies, just kind of touching back on something you mentioned earlier, like let's say this insurance thing had hit like right as this whole deal's going through and you're still in that first 60 days. Did you have like plans in place for that kind of stuff as well? And what would that have been?
So you're talking about underwriting an initial deal?
Well, like, no, just like, because you mentioned like the insurance rates going up 8x or whatever. So if that had happened on this deal, how would that have changed things, or would it have changed things in terms of your strategy or you being able to get the investors out as soon as you needed to or wanted to?
Yeah. So if that was the case and it truly was that much of an increase, I wouldn't close, because it had ruined my cash flow on my Florida properties until I found new policies. But so if I was under contract still in due diligence and my insurance was that high, I just wouldn't close it. So it's just like understanding where your lines are. I just don't buy cash flowing. If it doesn't cash flow, I don't buy it. Like that's just my gold standard because I'm trying to replace my income. Some people that are in a better wealth position, by all means, buying for appreciation is absolutely an amazing thing to do as well. I'm just not in a position where I can buy an asset just because it's going to gain value on exit. One day I'll be wealthy enough to just buy real estate for funsies, but today is not that day. So yeah, that would have busted my deals. But as for Tampa, so going back to, I think what your concern is, yes, people are going to have to sell because there are people that are not going to be able to afford their insurance policies, and it will have a massively detrimental effect on the real estate market in Florida.
Yeah, and I do want to touch on something that you just mentioned here a minute ago is that you as insurance rates were going up, you searched for other policies. And that kind of ties back to nursing a little bit as well, because everybody knows that loyalty doesn't pay. Like you need to constantly be looking for another job, looking for another option, looking for another insurance policy. And I mean, me personally, my salary doubled when I started moving around jobs. If I had stayed in my original job, it would have improved maybe 1% a year, 2% a year. But because I was okay looking around and actually putting a little effort to find something better, I was able to double, like I said, my income in just a few years. Similar to what you had to do there. Like you just looked around until you found a better policy. Don't be tied to one thing.
Yes, exactly. And that goes across the board too. Agents, property managers, you got to find what's best for you.
Yep. So are you doing any other kind of investing, or are all your eggs in real estate? All your eggs in one basket. That's what I meant to say.
Yes, they are all in real estate. I know so many people have opinions about that. I do have some investments in the stock market in a 401k, 403b, but it's a drop in the bucket of what I have in real estate. And it's truly because I'm just endlessly grateful for the way that real estate has built my wealth. Those properties that I bought, putting 25% down, even though it was like 50 grand for each, 50 or more for each property, the way that it has compounded with the cash flow and then reinvesting the money that I analyze. So like all of my reserves, my maintenance, my CapEx, all of that doesn't get spent, I'm reinvesting. And so it's compounding me into success in a way that the stock market truly could never do, ever. And so I am always interested in diversifying. I just don't know where that threshold is going to be for me in real estate, but we are nearing it. So I will look into other investment strategies, but I do not think the stock market will ever be a big one for me.
Maybe as soon as you're buying real estate for funsies, that's when you can throw some stuff in the stock market and just throwing money everywhere.
Yes. Let's do it. Make it rain.
All right. So we are going to move to our final segment. We're going to call this the Final Four. I say we're going to call it the Final Four. That's what we call it every time. So it's not a new name. All right. So the first one is, what's a top financial resource that you found for nurses specifically, whether it's a book, podcast, our podcast, your Instagram, anything else we should mention?
Yeah. The top financial, I would just say, are the other Instagram accounts of nurses that I follow. There are so many that are giving out really epic advice. So in real estate, the Net Worth Nurse is one. She talks about very different things than I do. But then some of the other ones is Nurses Investing for Wealth, I think is what it's called, or the Financially Intentional. So yeah, just so much knowledge out there on Instagram with other nurses pouring into all of us. Nurse Money Date. That's another good one.
We're going to have to go back and invite all these people on. We're actually having the Net Worth Nurse on in a couple of days. So looking forward to that.
Nice. Perfect. Yeah, she's amazing.
So what's your Instagram? I don't know if we've even plugged that yet. So go ahead and plug your Instagram real quick.
Yeah, it's investforfreedom_RN.
Okay. Sounds good. Make sure we didn't forget that one.
So as a new grad, or I guess now with all your experience, what would you tell yourself as a new grad?
Ooh, this is a tie. So I would say the first thing is that not buying into the toxic nurse shame culture that we have going on. Meaning, when I first started working in the ER, I would hear the other nurses say like, oh, I didn't pee or eat or do whatever for 13, 14 plus hours. Or like you'd be walking to the bathroom and they'd razz another nurse, which is, fine when it's in with good meaning, but just in general, like, no, how about we advocate like, hey, let me cover your patients so you can go eat or drink a sip of water or pee, or I don't know, just encouraging and not buying into that. I need to be tough. I need to not have emotion. I need to be able to not pee or eat to be a good nurse. I regret buying into that because I tortured myself doing it. So
that's great advice.
Yeah. Well, you said there were two things. What was the other?
No, the other big thing that I really regret is not realizing that I needed healthier coping mechanisms. Again, buying into the culture that we get off after night shift and we go drink at breakfast, or, just like all of the nurse poor jokes, things of that nature. Again, I love it. I love the stereotypes. It's funny. However, I wish I realized earlier on ways to have healthy stress release without having bad vices of drinking or bottling it up, or, just all of those other things. Just reaching for healthier options sooner.
Yeah, I did ER trauma for a while too, and they would do the debrief after, pretty bad traumas. And I think initially, because I had kind of come from that same kind of like tough, you're just tough, you deal with it, whatever mentality. Initially, I was kind of like, what is this? This is like stupid, like just move on, deal with it, whatever. But then after a while, when I was like actually like began to appreciate, and I was like, it's good that we're doing this. Like this is important. Yes. And I think like it gets overlooked a lot. So, that was at UCLA. So kudos to UCLA for implementing that, but it doesn't happen in a lot of places. So.
Exactly. And I was going to say, as when I was a travel nurse, I had only experienced that in California. So yes, it's amazing. And I definitely think it's something that should be embraced in other hospitals for sure.
So I like to make
California's not all bad.
I was just going to say, I love to make fun of California, but apparently they got some things okay.
Yeah.
All right. So number 3 is, what is your big goal for the next 12 months and what can we do to help you get there?
Ooh, well, thank you for offering support, first of all. It's so interesting. I'm still gunning for my big goal this year was to close a commercial property before the end of the year. So as you heard, I'm under contract and the days are going by quickly. So again, nobody close a bad deal just because it's a goal. I'm still so focused on making that happen that I haven't even thought about my goals for next year. But traveling and getting back to some of those things that really bring me joy is going to be one of them. So if anybody wants to donate money to me traveling somewhere overseas, that's all I could ask for. But I'm stoked. I'm actually going to Antarctica. So
whoa.
I know, right?
What made you decide Antarctica as opposed to any of these other amazing places?
Well, first of all, I've already been to 33 countries. So not saying that I've been everywhere that's amazing, but Antarctica is like a once in a lifetime. And I've already been to like Europe, Asia, some of South America, not enough, but it came up. And so just having that opportunity to do something that's so epic is basically why I said yes to that. But there are other top burners.
I don't know if this is true, but I heard that going to Antarctica is the most dangerous thing you can do. Is that true? The most dangerous travel destination? Maybe that's what it was.
You can't fly there. So I will say that I'm already nervous about how much Dramamine I'm going to need to take to make it through the pass. I forget the title of the pass, but yes, there's a pass. You're at sea for like 8 days, 4 days there. I think 4 days back.
Wow.
At least. So yeah, in this pass, there's like no land. So it's like supposedly like the roughest pass in the sea. I don't know if that's true or not, but
I think is that Drake's Passage?
Yes, thank you. Yes,
I think that's the one. Yeah.
Right, and all the way down south, you leave out of Argentina actually to go to Antarctica.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's like you're making me nervous.
There's a guy on Instagram named Colin O'Brady, and he did the Drake's
I'm obsessed.
Passage.
Yes.
Yeah, he wrote it with like 10 other guys or something like that. So if he can row across it, you'll be fine.
Okay, so I didn't know that about that, but I knew about his voyage across Antarctica, which was epic.
So what do you plan on doing while you're there? Just out of my own personal curiosity.
Yeah, so you actually just like stop at different places around. There's different colonies of penguins. There are really cool things that you can do with like weather balloons. But as I'm sure you know, some people don't know this, but there's no civilization on Antarctica. So the boats that we're going on has like a submarine and Zodiac boats and like all these like cool excursion things that you can do. So I've already gotten a lot of speeches about the submarine thing, but yes, I'm going to do it anyways. So yes.
So, well, you were in the Air Force, so now you're just hitting the U.S. or not the U.S. the world from all angles under the water.
Yeah, and it's actually funny. I tried to talk the Air Force into letting me go there for a solid 5 years, and I was not successful. That's one of the only planes that I'm aware of can land there. Is the Air Force flies in the weather people and does like medical stuff there. So that didn't work. So this is next best way.
Well, last question here is if you were to tell people to do one thing right now, so that's kind of a play on our name. It's the Investing RN for nurses, but obviously for nurses, but also for right now. So if you're going to tell people to do one thing right now to change maybe the trajectory of their life, I guess, what would that be?
Yeah. So people are going to hate me for saying this because it is so boring. However, the biggest point of change for me was when I first started budgeting and realized how much I was living outside of my means. If you are living and spending more money than you make, you will forever be broke. And that is the only way that there is to say that. So without understanding where your money is going, you don't know what expenses to cut back on, how to live with inside your means, how to save to invest. So that is truly the pinnacle starting point for me, is really understanding how much money you're making, keeping, and saving. And from there, the rest can be history.
Final four plus bonus. So what's the biggest financial mistake that you've made, and what did you learn from it?
Ooh. So the biggest mistake I made was becoming a passive investor in a syndication. And my biggest lesson from that is not having more faith in other people than you do in yourself. I handed over my money to a commercial manager of a syndication because I viewed him as an industry expert and viewed him as somebody that knew way more or was way more successful than me. And I put trust in that when I handed over my money. It is all gone. And so not only was it completely lost, but the returns that I have produced for myself are way better than many syndicators achieve. And I was discrediting that. So just like believing in yourself and not handing over your money to someone else, expecting them to do what's best for you. It is really surprising how well you can do for yourself. So just empowering people to believe in themselves in this investing journey.
That's some great advice there. So one last time, where can people find you on Instagram, right? I know I said this earlier.
InvestForFreedom_RN. Please reach out to me, and I look forward to connecting with everybody.
Good. Well, we really appreciate your time and for all this valuable information.
Thank you for having me on.
This is the Investing RN.